It might be over soon.
Hey guys, my name is Cassie and I am here to talk to you guys about the Mara Dyer Trilogy. So today I just finished the final book in the Mara Dyer Trilogy and I cannot contain my feelings about this series, you guys. To start off, I'm going to tell you how this is going to go. For the first part, I'll give you a little bit of a non-spoilery review, and then I'm going to go into each book. So the series overall is about a girl. Mara is this girl who's struggling to cope with this circumstance that happens, and then as she goes through the series, she gets a little bit crazy. She does some kind of insane things, and all of these things kind of pile up on top of each other until at the end of the book 3, she truly becomes the person who she is meant to be. We go through the first book sort of seeing some reactions that she has to this instance, and her family thinks she's just kind of trying to cope with this situation that she's been through. She meets this boy, Noah, who they end up finding out that they have a little bit more in common than they had originally thought. Their paths keep crossing and their lives kind of become intertwined, and that's pretty much the premise of the first book of the series. I gave this one 4 stars because in the middle of it I was kind of not getting it and it was a little bit confusing. So I was like, it's good. I really liked it. I mean, I read it in a day and a half, so I must have liked it. But then as I got into book 2 and book 3, I loved them. Like, I think I read this in less time than I read the first book because it was so good, so intense. And then the third book, I kind of waited a week and then I read it in a day and a half. So I hope that can kind of wrap up the 3 books. So now that we've gone through the sort of non-spoilery section, please take a minute and go away. Click out of this video. If you don't want to be spoiled, please leave. I don't want to spoil anything for you. This series is so crazy, so please leave. Go read it. If you haven't read it, go read it. I'll see you later. Okay, bye.
It might be over soon.
Now that shenanigan's over, guys, let's talk about this series. So I loved this book. I didn't like it nearly as much as the second 2, but let's talk about it. We first pick up with Mara Dyer. She has moved to Florida. She's starting a new school. She's kind of recovering from this building collapse, but we don't really know anything at the beginning, and it's so creepy because there's all these instances of lost time and hallucinations, and we're kind of like, what is going on inside of her brain? Is she crazy? Is she going crazy? She's going to school and she's seeing her friends that were with her that died in the crash. She's seeing them, like she's seeing them in mirrors, and she's seeing her ex-boyfriend Jude like walking towards her across the courtyard. Like, what is that? That's crazy. Like he just kind of shows up, and then all of a sudden she meets Jamie in the beginning, and I love Jamie throughout the whole series. Whenever his name was mentioned, like I just smiled. He was such a good tension breaker in this series. You're going through and you're like, oh my god, I feel like she's going crazy. Oh, what's gonna happen? And then like she goes, oh hey, and then there's Jamie, and you're like, okay, everything's gonna be okay. She's gonna be all right, y'all. It killed my soul halfway through this book when we realized that Jamie was gonna be kicked out of the school because Anna and Adrian, I can't even remember his name. I blocked him from my memory. I freaking hated him. When they got Jamie kicked out of school, I was seething. I could feel Mara's hatred. You were like, oh, everything before that with the dog owner and Morales, like, yeah, you were mad about that stuff. But with Aiden, yeah, his name's Aiden. When Anna and Aiden, like, she didn't make anything happen to them, I was kind of like upset. I know that I'm a terrible person, but I just wanted Jamie to be okay. The creepiest scene in this book for me was the chicken blood Santeria priest guy. And that whole thing was like, girl, what are you doing? Somebody gives you a cup of blood, why are you gonna drink it? That's not okay. That's so gross. Why would you do that? She's being a little bit insane, and Noah is just going along with it. Something I found really unplausible about this book was how much money Noah had. That bothered me. Unlimited pocket space, like he's just got a wallet overfilling with dollar bills, y'all. One thing that really got me throughout this whole series was his lack of conversation about his family. He didn't say anything. Noah was always really like skeptical and closed off about his dad, and then later on we find out that his dad was the one who orchestrated the whole thing. So at the end of the first book, we see that Mara is kind of coming to terms with the fact that she has these powers, and she is starting to realize like, oh crap, I was the one who caused Rachel and Claire to die, and now Jude is haunting me, but she doesn't realize until the end of the book that Jude was alive. And at the end of this book, we still don't really know if he was alive or not. Was she hallucinating? At this point in the story, we're almost convinced that she's lost her mind, even though she knows what's happening to her. She even, like, they put a name to it, they kind of figure it out, but then she's still going insane. And so at the end of this book, Jude is walking past her in the police department, and she's starting to scream, freak out, and I'm like, why won't you just calmly explain to somebody why this can't be happening? So that was what I took away from this first book. In the second book, we go in to this story and we wake up and she is in the hospital ward, and we're like, oh, come on, like, Mara, you could have been smart about this, but I understand when panic sets in, there's not much you can do about it. You've just got to freak out. I was impressed throughout the whole first book that she didn't freak out. I was impressed that she didn't freak out in this second book. The first couple of scenes you see are with her family coming in, telling her, hey, everything's gonna be okay. This is not permanent. I think this is when we first meet Dr. Kells. They're just trying to make sure that she's okay and she's gonna be all right to return to her normal life. But after a couple of days of just complete pretending that she's all right, realizes, hey, like, no one's gonna believe me that Jude exists. No one's gonna believe me that he's following me and trying to kill me. He's the one that survived from that crash. She's got these powers. She knows she caused the crash. She's thinking he wants vengeance. Jude is the one that's been kind of tormenting her, but she realizes that anything she says about it is gonna label her as crazy. So the first half of this book is her just trying to pretend she's normal, while all the while she's just going in a downward spiral of insanity. She gets out of the psych ward after the 72 hours, but only on the condition that she has to go to an outpatient treatment facility. She goes there, and the first thing that happens, of course, big smile, Jamie's there. She walks in and she sees Jamie, and it's like, she's gonna be okay. She goes through the outpatient treatment where she meets Stella, Phoebe, and these are two girls that kind of end up playing a kind of crucial role in this book. She goes with Jamie to this outpatient treatment center, and everything seems kind of like it's getting okay, except for the fact that Mara's starting to have all of these memory flashbacks. I had my suspicions from the beginning that it was Mara's grandmother. They kind of mentioned Mara's grandmother in the first book, but they didn't really mention her story, her backstory, until they realized that Noah's mom and Mara's grandmother knew each other, and they were like, they're in a picture. How would they know each other? That they didn't even exist at the same, like, what? It's starting to happen every time Mara goes to sleep or passes out, and that kind of makes her a little bit more crazy, and she's trying to realize, like, what is going on. Halfway through this book, we realize that Mara has been taken. Noah he's kind of out of town. He's going and researching things about Jude, and while he's gone, he's on a plane, Mara is kidnapped by Jude. And this was a crazy scene to me. This is like solidifying that, yeah, Jude was real. He's a physical person. I think that's the first time that we even see him in this series, that he's actually real. This character that's been haunting her for the past 2 books is real, and he's torturing her. Eventually he has her locked up, and the only way she can get out is by basically inflicting harm to herself. But then at the end of it, when she finally is found, she's almost dead. She looks like she was trying to commit suicide. Like, that is what she physically looks like. And everybody else around her doesn't believe her when she says, it wasn't me, he was making me do this. Nobody believes her. It was a giant setup for her to be sent off to the Horizons inpatient treatment center. And that's when things started getting really crazy. Jamie and Stella and Phoebe, they all end up going there together for their retreat. But as we know, it was just a giant setup for all of them to be there together, for Jude, the evilest, horrible person ever, to make his final scene. At the climax of this story, we see Jude. He's gathered all of the people that have so-called powers, got them to where they can't move, and they're like in this circle in the Zen garden. I find that so funny that they were in the Zen garden. Like, the most opposite Zen moment of Mara's life happens in a Zen garden. Noah is there because when Mara gets shipped off, Noah goes crazy and he like dramatically pushes a man into a shark tank. I find that humorous. He was like, okay. At this point in the story, Noah's feeling a little bit guilty for not being there for Mara. His private investigator couldn't protect her. He didn't find any clues back in Rhode Island when he tried to research things about Jude. So he's kind of feeling guilty, like it's all his fault. And so he takes it upon himself to get thrust into this facility. All the while, like, Jude is there, he's planning his crazy moment of revenge. Mara shows up. Phoebe has been killed, like slashed open in front of her, like not in front of her, but she wakes up to her body like slashed open. And then Mara kind of goes to the Zen garden to finally see all of her friends. Jamie, Noah is there, and Stella and Megan, and this girl Tara is already killed. They're all there, and they're all super scared and freaked out, and Jamie's even freaked out, and that kind of like, you're like, oh no, things are gonna get bad. And so eventually Jude is trying to get Mara to be afraid so she can bring Claire, Jude's sister, back to life. Mara knows that that can't happen, but Jude's been lied to, saying that if he gets Mara afraid enough, she can use her powers to bring Claire back. That doesn't happen. But she kind of tricks him. She's trying to lie to him like she can do it. But eventually, at the end of the book, she's like, well, if I can't save these people, I'm gonna kill them, and I'm gonna kill Jude with me. And so she's trying to tell him that Dr. Kells lied to him, that he's been tricked his whole life. And so finally at the end of the book, Jude has her in this kind of like knife against her throat kind of situation, and Mara's like, you know what, I'm gonna use my powers, I'm gonna bring the building down. And so she kind of takes him over and makes him her victim. She brings the tower down, and that's where we end this book. Total cliffhanger, and you're like, ah. So finally we get to book 3, The Retribution of Mara Dyer. This book killed me. It was so good. I was creeped out, I was cringing, I was excited, I was invigorated. I couldn't get enough of this book. I read it in a day and a half. Looking at this book, where we pick off from book 2, it opens with this scene where she's answering questions, and she's like completely almost on truth serum, like she's paralyzed, and Dr. Kells is asking her these questions, and then she has this reaction. And then when we wake up next, she's in this kind of box of mirrors, and she's kind of on the bed in her white surgical gown, and her reflection is talking back to her in like the third person. Like she was talking to a different person, but it was her reflection talking to her. That scene creeped me out so much. I had to reread it a couple times. I was like, wait, what? What's happening? She's talking to herself, but in the reflection. And the reflection is supposedly her consciousness. This sense of lost time keeps coming back. This consciousness is trying to recap for her what's happened while she's kind of been out of it. She tells her all of the things that Dr. Kells and this guy Wayne have been performing on her. She doesn't freak out though, because Dr. Kells has kind of told her, hey, I'm putting you on this drug that will separate your emotions. You won't really be ruled by fear or anxiety. You'll be able to live normally, but without those emotions. So the whole first quarter, I would say, of this book is Mara trying to get out of this inpatient treatment facility that she's been trapped in. Suddenly she kind of wakes up out of this memory, another one of her grandmother's memories, and she is paralyzed from the waist down, but there's this Wayne is killed in front of her, blood everywhere. Wayne is carrying this tape recorder, and on the tape recorder is Jude's voice explaining to Mara how she can get out of this compound, where she can go to get a map and the real files that Dr. Kells has been keeping on her patients. So at this point in the story, we have realized that Mara thinks that Noah is dead. She's seen it written on the whiteboard, she's seen it written on the files, and Dr. Kells has told her that Noah passed away, that he died in the collapse, which we can't know. Mara's convinced there's no way he's dead. He can heal himself. That is his power. But we go through half of this book before we realize that he's not dead. As Mara gets out of the compound, she finds Jamie and finds Stella, and they kind of make their way out of this what turns out to be a crazy huge facility. And they're like, there's no way that this place doesn't have funding. There's probably a bunch of made up stories, like paper trails that have been erased and redacted. The first thing I thought when they were like, somebody has to be funding this, I bet it's Noah's family. That was my first thought, and guess what? It freaking was. At the end of this book, we find out that David Shaw has been manipulating these people's lives for a long time. He's just kind of the one that shoved them all together there at the end. As we go through this story, it kind of paints a clearer picture. All of a sudden we see that Mara's grandmother didn't just live, she lived for like 2 centuries or something. Is this kind of like one of those immortality things? And that's never really answered for us, but we know that she kind of came from these jungles. She grew up with this person, the uncle and the sister, who both died, and she realized that she had the same kind of power that our Mara did. She could kind of leave destruction in her wake. The grandmother goes through her life kind of being taught and being molded by these different people. She goes to London and she gets married, but her husband dies on her wedding night. This character called the Professor comes and takes the grandmother and kind of molds her and shapes her. Professor leaves, only to come back many years later, 21 years later, after the grandmother has had Indy, Mara's mother. The professor says, you have to come help me. I know what's going to happen with your family. Your daughter is just graduated college and she's pregnant with our Mara. Mara is having her grandmother's memories in these dreams. We see the grandmother, go back to London with the professor to help convince Noah's mom to have a baby and to sacrifice herself so that Noah can be born. The professor and the grandmother have known for a long time that these powers exist. The grandmother's granddaughter, our Mara, she's going to be this person who leaves destruction in her wake, and she needs a hero to balance her out. That's what we kind of think until the end, and then all of a sudden we're like, Noah wasn't born to balance Mara out. He was born to kill Mara and bring balance to the world, bring light to the world. We don't find this out until all of a sudden Mara is met by Jude again, taken by him again, and all of a sudden David Shaw walks out. Hello, I totally called it. David Shaw kind of reveals all of these details, and Noah is confused, just as confused as heck as Mara is. David Shaw is saying, this has been planned. Noah, you were supposed to kill Mara. Instead, you fell in love with her. David has Mara's brother and Jamie locked away, and they're gonna die, and Mara's family is in danger and all this stuff, and Mara is kind of takes it upon herself to tell him, like, no, look, you've got to kill me. You gotta end this. The craziest scene in this book to me was when Mara starts like doing surgery on herself, and she's realizing that there's something stuck inside her. There were these capsules implanted into her body, and so she tries to like cut them out herself, which failed obviously, and so she kind of wakes up, and Jamie and Stella are like standing over her like freaking out, like not knowing what to do. And so Stella comes in like a boss, and she's like, okay, I can do the surgery, let me take him out. I thought it was hilarious that they thought she was pregnant. They were like, oh my god, you're pregnant. Nah, it was the capsules. At the end of this book, it was heart-wrenching. I actually cried a little bit. Mara asks Noah to finally kill her, but then Mara wakes up after Jude, I guess, pushes an adrenaline pump through her. Jude asks her to kill him, and so we finally see that Jude is dead. And then, you know, the climax kind of dwindles down, and there's a little bit more extra afterwards. They get these letters from the professor who ended up being Lukumi, the Santeria priest who gave the chicken blood. He leaves letters for each of them to kind of, I guess, recruit them into this way of life. And Jamie kind of automatically hops on board. He's like, well, I like my powers, I like what I can do, so I might as well. He puts on the little pendant and goes forth. But Mara and Noah don't really know what they want to do. I think Noah at the end chooses not to. He decides that he doesn't want to be a part of it. But Mara decides that she doesn't know. And at the end of the book, I think this is so creative. I love it when authors do this. We find that Mara is going to be writing her story down. And so we can assume that she wrote these 3 books, and she was the one who authored these. So I think that's kind of fun. Those are my immediate thoughts on this trilogy. I'm sure I'm gonna probably reread these at some point. What did you guys think? I really want to know if you've read this series. What did you think? I really liked it. I hope you guys did too. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bamboozled again. My camera just fell. Why are all characters named Jamie great characters? It'll be a short video, I promise.